Hi, I'm Thiago Serra. This is a tease for a paper on optimization for combinatorial testing that my collaborators and I have just made available online. Now, in combinatorial testing, we want to verify if a system works properly. For that, we need tests. So let's say that our system is made of on-off components, such as like a button that can be up or down. Now, each component in this system can be modeled by a parameter that's binary. It's either 0 or 1. And if we're going to test the system, every test means that we choose how each button is going to be. If the button is going to be on or off, 0 or 1. Some of these tests are going to lead to failures, and we want to cover all of such tests. Now, as you can imagine, every button doubles the number of tests if we were to try everything, which becomes impossible in practice. But empirically, we know that most system failures happen because of a small subset of the buttons at specific positions. For example, one button being off, or another button being on, combined with a third button being off. They are not going to involve a lot of different parameters at the same time. So we can use tests to cover every possible assignment on a subset of the parameters so that we can cover most of what could go wrong. The solution for us here is going to be a test matrix, and we're going to see some examples based on T. Now, T has to do with covariance strength. For T equals 1, we're picking one parameter at a time. So we want to see that parameter being set to 0, that parameter being set to 1. That is an almost trivial case. Well, if you have one test where all the parameters are set to 0, a second test where all the parameters are set to 1, and here, every column corresponds to what values we set to the parameters in different tests. Then we have covered each parameter being 0, each parameter being 1. Now, if we have a strength 2, T equals 2, now we're picking every pair of parameters, xi, xj, and making sure that we have tests covering 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. And it turns out it's not too expensive to try that out. For 10 parameters, you only need 6 tests. So you can pick any two columns here. You're going to find 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1, which is nice. Now, there are things we want, things we know, and things we learned in this process. We want a minimum number of tests to cover the case T equals 2, which is the first non-trivial one. The unconstrained case is actually easy. There's a construction with which you can find an optimal solution. But this problem becomes NP hard the moment you add pairwise constraints. For example, there is a specific pair of parameters that cannot take a specific pair of values. So for that pair of parameters, you want to cover everything but that particular pair of values. But there are some properties from the unconstrained case that we can still apply. And these properties relate to the columns, basically what assignments we set to each parameter. For example, here's a column for the second parameter in green, showing what values we chose in each test. So here are the properties that are interesting for us. First, no two columns can be the same. If they're the same, we cover 1, 1, 0, 0, and we do not cover 0, 1, and 1, 0. Second, no two columns are complements. Otherwise, we're flipping the case, and we're not covering 0, 0, or 1, 1. Third, if we fix n, the balanced columns are going to accommodate more parameters. For n even, if we satisfy that and the other two properties, we can find an optimal solution, if n is small as possible. If n is odd, it's a little more tricky, but balanced columns is going to be better. And there's one change in the constraint case that opens up all the discussion in the paper. Now, not all columns can be balanced. We do want them to be balanced because we can accommodate more. But let's say, for example, that x1, x2 cannot take 1, 0, meaning that for x1, x2, I want to cover 0, 0, 0, 1, and 1, 1, but I don't want to cover 1, 0. Well, if x1 is 1, then x2 is 1. But there's going to be at least one row, one test, where we want to see 0, 1, which means that column 2 is going to have more 1s than column 1, which means we're not going to have the same number of 1s across different columns. Now, I don't want to ruin the rest of the paper, so this is where we start the discussion about how having constraints makes this problem more difficult, and we formulate optimization models for that purpose, develop heuristics. And I just want to give you one interesting finding that is not very intuitive, which is adding constraints sometimes is going to decrease how many tests we have to make, and sometimes not. Let's say we think about 5 parameters. If we don't have any constraints, we need 6 tests. If we say that x4, x5 cannot be 1, 0, still we need 6 tests. But if we say that x3, x5 cannot be 1, 0, now we're down to 5 tests. But if we also say that we don't want x2, x5 to be 1, 0, we're back to 6 tests, which is surprising. Now, there's more to the paper. If you're interested, you can find it on a preprint server near you. Bye.